pretty much everybody that's here today is involved in some way, shape, or form in the development of technologies that are saving lives every day. So, as entrepreneurs and inventors, what would you say to them are the most important ingredients for success, especially when companies or inventors are struggling to kind of get their product through either the product development process or even through a patent process and just the beginning stages?
So the question is, how do you help them?
Yeah, what would you say are the main ingredients for success in this area in terms of from the starting point, where they need to start?
One is never give up. I mean, these things are harder and they take longer than you think, and if you're not willing to work hard and want something done very, very quickly, that rarely happens. So you start out with that kind of attitude. I'm going to make this work no matter what. You have to have a good mentor that knows something about that process, and that is what worries me. There's going to be fewer and fewer because we're not educating people. Because the people that are capable of helping with that educational process and being good mentors are not in teaching environments. Most innovators now, there never used to be a physician that would work with industry. Now they leave academia so they can work with industry, because industry produces something. They don't produce many papers. Academia, they produce a lot of papers, most of which are dated within 1 year. So we have to get out of this concept that papers are important, grants are important, but if you look at academia, that's really where their money comes from. And that attitude is pervasive. Money should come from benefiting society. And when you come to the conclusion there aren't many papers that do that, you have to say, okay, how do we benefit society? Well, our society is patients. So we should do things to benefit patients. And that is just the way it should be. I think we've lost sight and often look at other things as things that we should do. And we should do them, but they're not very beneficial.
So would you say at this point you think that the government is supportive in terms of providing funding or investment through various grants to institutions or?
Look, most all the grants are based on basic clinical science. It's not even clinical science, it's science. I mean, we don't help many humans by operating on mice. It doesn't relate too often. Well, you look at grants, the NIH, they're doing something to a mouse or a monkey or some animal, rabbits, all kinds of things. You can't always relate those occurrences in the animal to the human. The NIH has been basic science eccentric ever since it started. When you look at it and you try to track what has come out of that, there's some things that have come out of it, but that science has been really beneficial to clinical science when it's implemented. And so it's you people, physicians, that help implement that. We got enough science to back up many things that we do. NIH does not give grants for clinical excellence. It's wrong incentive. It is. The incentive should be to make patients better.
So what would you say right now is the biggest danger facing the medical device industry?
You say something nice.
I'll say it again. I think the medical device industry is full of people that have incredible passion, working on some of the most exciting products I've ever seen in a world that now has technologies that come from other industries, whether it's high-speed processing or digital imaging or proteomics, genomics. There's incredible technologies out there. There's incredible people out there doing incredible things. I think this industry, however, has been distracted and has turned what we think. The issue that you commonly hear is the FDA, the people, as I said before, don't want to approve it, and the FDA people have made industry seem like the bad guy. And it's a sideshow that they're fighting with each other because neither one of them, I don't think, is either at fault or can fix it. I think the medical industry is full of some extraordinary people doing some things really well, innovating. But we don't do certain things very well, like communicate to the public at all. So they get all of their news and all of their perspective from lunatics on the left and lunatics on the right that want to find simple solutions to problems that don't cost anything, that promise people things that are unrealistic. And the public of the United States needs to be educated. They need to be grounded in reality. They need to hear from smart people that can give them a real perspective on what's possible. And if the medical industry collectively would educate the public, then maybe a consequence would be that this top-down from Washington looking for simple solutions, which end up giving the FDA this unrealistic agenda, which is don't let anything that could possibly go wrong ever get approved. You can do that, but the consequences, as we've seen, are chilling. But you're not going to change the people in the FDA to act any differently until their incentives are changed. And their incentives won't be changed until the public understands if you want to explore new places, if you want to raise the bar on humanity, you take some reasonable risk. And sadly, this industry, I think, doesn't even attempt to communicate with the public. I almost feel like it's too bad that the public has no awareness of what's going on in this room today. They rarely see all the exciting upside of industry, so it's not surprising that they have the very skewed perspective that they have, and it's not at all surprising to me that over the years the FDA has continued to get more and more and more conservative, because that's pretty much what they're told to do by our, quote, leadership in Washington. And you don't see a lot of leaders in Washington going out to the public and telling them the truth. They'd rather patronize the public. They don't say to the public, you want great new medical breakthroughs? They cost money. You want to try these unbelievable ways to cure people from incurable diseases? We got to take some risks here. And sometimes there's going to be accidents and problems. Well, that takes courage. It takes leadership. It takes understanding of technology. There's not a lot of that floating around outside of this industry, and this industry talks to itself. It doesn't have a voice to the public, and shame on us for not doing that.
Well, why do you think there is such a lack of engagement with the public? Where does that stem from?
Well, I think part of it is physicians' fault. We are the last interface between a patient with a problem, and when we feel that there is a technology that would address that problem and you can't use it, you tell them to go offshore. Ask why. And then you start the dialogue. And I do that because I have an obligation to do what is best for the patient. And if they can afford to go offshore and there's a better technology and better physicians, which they often are because they've been using this technology sometimes for 10 years longer than we are in the United States. So I think physicians bear responsibility in this. Unfortunately, I'll give you an example. At Stanford, we have a medical news publication that comes out, I think it's once every month. It's usually, it talks about many things, but the last one that came out, 3-page, what happens when medical technology goes wrong. And then he chronicles what happened to one patient. And it was related probably not to the technology, but it was probably related to bad case selection. Here is a prominent magazine, prominent university, berating everybody that's involved in new technology. What do the students think? Well, go ahead, Tom.
I think there's maybe even a more direct, simple answer to your question. Why isn't industry more involved? Because most technology people are into technology. And they're excited by it, and they're busy, hardworking, doing it. And I think they've assumed, and over years past, it was probably a reasonable assumption, there are other smart people in public policy that are making sure the public gets the education they need. Politics wasn't that polarized that long ago. Most people in industry, not all, but most people, want to tell the truth about how they're going forward with their products and their developments, and try to present a reasonable upside for what they're proud of, and try to present the real and actual reasonable risks. The problem is they've been forced to be adversaries the way our political leaders are adversaries. If the industry would go directly to the public, if the public had a better understanding of what's going on, which they're only going to get from us, they might direct our political leaders to start giving the FDA the right incentives to make the right decisions, to more quickly allow innovation to become part of healthcare. That's the only way we're going to get the quality up, the cost down. Industry is otherwise going to leave this country and go around the world where they are eager to have innovation. They are willing to take reasonable risks to innovate. They are willing to take reasonable risks to make healthcare more available and more cost effective. And the American public has to understand all the trade-offs. And I think this industry ought to be part of the voice that helps the public understand those trade-offs. And shame on us if we don't do that.
I have a question of the audience and Dean. Who do you think is going to publish anything industry says relative to the benefits they brought to our community? Somebody answer. Well, they're certainly doing the best they can. But once again, if you listen closely, their audience is industry. Their audience should be patients. And, but it's difficult getting something published very often when the culture that's developed in the United States in governmental agencies is no harm at any cost. And that cost often is benefiting patients. And it doesn't make sense, but I would still like to have something available where we could get these messages across. I haven't seen anything how much we have done to benefit patients in the last 10 years. And when you think about it as a physician, it is absolutely amazing. Open heart surgery, when it started, we killed 50% of the patients. That's a lot. We rapidly progressed through technology, changes in procedures, better support, use of medicines, to where the mortality rate for some of those procedures is now less than 1%. Think about heart attacks. People that have a heart attack, they'd be in the hospital for a month. And half of them didn't leave. That is not the situation. We have made very significant improvements. Industry has been really the ones that made these things happen. And physicians who are forward thinking adopted these technologies. So we have to really toot our own horn. When a physician does it, you go to the FDA and do anything, you leave with the impression that you've done something wrong. And that sets up a combative atmosphere. So the culture has to change both on the physician side, industry side, and the FDA side. Changing cultures are very, very difficult, take a very long time. And so I think the challenge is time. The time is now to get our message out, both as innovators and as industry and as physicians.
Okay, so we are just about out of time, so I would like you to leave the audience with just some kind of inspiring words about innovation in the industry and just something they can take home with them, you know, to remember when times get tough in the product development process and working with FDA and what they're doing every day. What's the one thing you want them to remember?
Well, one is we have to work with the FDA. Being nasty and mean on both sides has not helped. So we have to be collaborative, as hard as it may be, but I think that is the first step. And the other, we can't give up in making that effort. The minute you punch somebody in the nose, whether it be physically or through the mouth, you got a problem. And so we got to quit punching one another and make them convinced that we are really trying to do the best thing for our patients. And the FDA should allow us to do that, not get in the way. They never think of how many patients died because of a lack of a better technology. And they got to start thinking that way. We're all here to help patients. And the FDA can really get in the way. And we have to quit doing that. We have to be collaborative, we have to cooperate, we have to be upfront, we have to be honest, and we have to respect one another.
I agree with that, but I think, again, we live in a democracy, and we get what we deserve. Until most people, in a democracy, it's very inefficient. 51% of the people get to decide what's true. They may or may not be the 51% that have the most realistic information at their disposal to make those decisions, especially if they look at the press, which, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. I would say to the innovators in this room, we should collectively make sure that the message that goes to the public is there is no innovation ever that can happen with no risk and no cost. But we have to start making sure that the whole public understands that there's a bigger risk of being so conservative, of making innovation so difficult to achieve. There's a bigger risk to the public, to the future, of lack of action than making a mistake. You make a mistake, you move quickly, you fix it. You see what the mistake is, and you move on. That's called progress. But putting your head in the sand or saying, I don't want to take any more chances, or I don't want to approve any more new things, may seem like a safe solution, and it may not be intuitively obvious very quickly how many people will suffer or die because of lack of access to something. But the public's not going to know how much they're missing out on relative to the rest of the world unless they're told. And that's not a story that's been told. It's not easy to tell. And frankly, it's not a simple story. The politicians want simple stories. You deserve everything. And it should be free. And you should take that pill and it'll cure that incurable cancer. But by the way, you shouldn't even lose any hair. It should be a miracle, it should be free, and there should be no risk. I'd like that too. I want to hear that story and believe it. Most of the public does hear that story and does believe it because they don't hear anything else. And then when something goes wrong, they want to find somebody to blame. And it's either the guys at the FDA or us. I think the FDA people and the industry people are easy to be the scapegoat for one side or the other of the lunatic fringe of political leadership, when in fact it should be the people at the FDA and the people in this room that are working together to deliver to the public the best health care we can with the fastest rate of integrating innovation into the future that we can. But it won't happen until the FDA is given the charter to take that stance. And that won't happen until we get political leadership that has a little vision and courage. And that won't happen until the public demands it. And that won't happen until the public gets realistic. And that won't happen until you make them that way. Because who else is going to do it?
Well, I wish we had more time, but Tom Fogarty, Dean Kamen, thank you so much for taking the time today.